So a few weeks ago, we talked about the villains or who would be the villains of college football once coaches like Nick Saban and Jim Harbaugh have departed the sport. And I think you can be both a villain and a rock star. I think because for every person who views you as a villain, it's really easy to say that somebody else would view you as a rock star. It's all in the eye of the beholder, right? So, since we talked about the villains, I want to talk about who the rock stars of college football coaches are in 2024. Because, for better or worse, being college football and college basketball, college sports in general, coaches are a lot of the time the draw. They are the marketing tool. They are the familiarity that you have with a certain school, program, what have you, because they don't change as often as the players do. It's one of the downfalls of college sports is that the players, outside of the transcendent generational talents, generally don't become the faces of the sport. It is the coaches who do that. Those players then go on to the NFL and they become the faces of the NFL because they get to have longer sustained careers than they did in college sports. Now we're in a time where some dudes are going into year number 9 of college football, so it's a little bit different. But for the most part, it is the coaches and the brands that you are familiar with. So I've got a list of 6 coaches here that I consider rock stars of the college football world. And I don't even know if I was to sit down and try to define to you what I think a rock star is. One, I guess I think a rock star to me in my standpoint is like if you're sitting at the airport, it's 5:42 a.m. You're scheduled to leave at 6:05. You're tired. You're grumpy. You're wearing comfortable clothes, kind of looking like a schlub. You got headphones on because you are not interested in talking to anyone else in the world. And you saw one of these guys, these college football coaches, walk through the airport. You're going to look up, you're going to take your headphones off and think, I should go ask that guy for a picture. I realize that is wholly unscientific. But I think that's what a rock star college football coach is. So I have 6 guys. The first one is Deion Sanders. I feel like that speaks for itself. One, even if Deion Sanders was not the coach at Colorado, Deion Sanders is in rock star category. Deion Sanders fits the bill of I am getting my ass up out of that chair to go ask Deion Sanders for a picture. Throw in the fact that he is now the head coach of the University of Colorado and is a lightning rod for both praise and criticism in the college football world. I think it's no argument that Deion Sanders is a rock star head coach. I think Lane Kiffin is in that category too. Because coupled with the I'd get off my ass to go get a picture with this person, I also think kind of the rock star quality is like, if you got the opportunity to sit down and have a beer with these people, I think you might do it. And I think Deion Sanders and Lane Kiffin are two. Like Lane Kiffin looks like a good time, looks like a dude you're going to have fun with. And is also, it's going to be a nice picture to have. Of like, hey, I met Lane Kiffin at the airport. People are going to be interested in how was he? Was he cool? Was he interesting? Was he a jerk? People want to know. I think Lane Kiffin's in that category. Marcus Freeman, to me, is a rock star. One, just because his ascension to the head coach at Notre Dame was so quick, so unheralded, but then also at the same time, when he got that job, you could see the excitement in the players' eyes of like, I'm so glad that this guy is our coach. And he brings a certain energy and a certain... I don't think Marcus Freeman is cocky or arrogant. I think Marcus Freeman is insanely confident in himself. And there's a line there to walk, unquestionably. But I think Marcus Freeman is insanely confident in who he is as a person, who he is as a coach, who he is, period. And that confidence, to me, puts you in rock star category. So I think Marcus Freeman's in that camp. There are 3 others, and these are the ones that I think you can debate the most. And I'm certain I'm missing somebody off the top of my head. But one of them is James Franklin at Penn State. And part of the rock star category, to me, I think, is the Keegan-Michael Key impersonation of James Franklin. But James Franklin exudes this kind of confidence and assuredness that is similar to Marcus Freeman, that he's very secure in who he is, what he's not, and doesn't ever really project anything other than flat out confidence. And so I think he deserves to be on that list, but might also be the most debatable one. The last 2, Dan Lanning at Oregon. And I think almost strictly because of the behind the scenes pep talk footage of him talking about Oregon about to go play Colorado last year, where he's talking about, we're going to go kick their ass because we're about playing football and they're about Instagram and everything else other than what happens between these white lines. And it went insanely viral, and it showed people a side of Dan Lanning that probably virtually nobody in America had seen. And that alone, I think puts you in the rock star category. But then you couple it with, it certainly appeared as if he was Alabama's number 1 choice to replace Nick Saban. And I know that Alabama can argue that he was not, that they never even had conversations with him, whatever the case may be. Dan Lanning essentially gave the double bird to Alabama when there were reports that he was on a flight to Tuscaloosa, that there were contract negotiations already. They put out a video of him essentially giving Alabama the double middle finger salute, saying, it's the Wolf of Wall Street, I'm not bleeping leaving story. Like, you look like a badass when you turn down the top job in the sport in the manner in which you did. Now, the flip side of that is you got to be successful. You've got to take Oregon to new heights, because whether you like it or not, you're inexplicably going to be linked to that job forever. How Kalen DeBoer does at Alabama is going to be how Dan Lanning is assessed at Oregon. And people will wonder, did you make the right decision or not? So you got to back up the check that your ass has already cashed, but it's impressive. And then the last one I have is Steve Sarkisian. And I think Steve Sarkisian gets into rockstar category because, like a lot of people, Steve Sarkisian has some skeletons in the closet that we don't ever talk about. And I don't think we need to talk about him anymore. And I think that propels you to rock star status, because for a long list of coaches in college football, whether it be the top echelon, the upper crust of college football, you can point to, it's the same thing. Doug Gottlieb, is a Fox Sports radio host. And anytime he says something that might be mildly controversial or against the grain or whatever the case may be, that people might not agree with. Yeah, but you stole credit cards when you were in college. Like, it was just 30 years ago. And people still bring it up all of the time. And I can't, I'm guilty of this on the show where, like, I've talked about Brian Kelly before in the past. Like, Brian Kelly is directly responsible for a student at Notre Dame's death. And we don't ever, like, it very rarely comes up anymore. But it's really easy to just point to, like, yeah, well, you killed a kid. We don't do that with Steve Sarkisian. We don't say you lost one of the best jobs in the sport because you were a drunk. Because it's not fair and it's not relevant anymore. And for you, and for the way we kind of work as a society in 2024, to be able to skip past that fact, I think kind of puts you into rock star status. He's the head coach at one of the biggest brands, at one of the biggest reclamation projects in the sport. And we don't say, yeah, but it just doesn't happen. And I'm glad it doesn't happen because I don't know that he deserves that. But similarly to James Franklin, to Dan Lanning, to Marcus Freeman, there's a feeling of extreme confidence with Steve Sarkisian that I think is admirable if you can back it up. If you can't, you look like an a-hole. But he has so far. And so I think that works for him. And I think Steve Sarkisian is one of those guys, you're like, I'm going to get up and go ask that guy for a picture in the airport because, you know, that's the definitive ranking of what is and isn't a rock star. That'll do it for today's edition of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you are listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. See you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily